The coffee cup hit the marble counter with a sound that was almost, but not quite, accidental. "You are nothing in this house," my stepmother said. "You have always been nothing. A placeholder. A reminder of a woman your father should have forgotten years ago." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at her reflection in the kitchen window, adjusting her earring, checking her lipstick, performing the small rituals of a woman, preparing to be seen by the world. As though what she had just said to me was simply another item on her morning checklist. As though I were furniture that had, briefly and inconveniently, learned to hear. My father sat at the breakfast table 4 feet away. He turned a page of his newspaper. 14 years. 14 years of this kitchen, this counter, this particular brand of erasure, delivered casually, consistently, in the specific register of a woman who had decided, on some unmemorable Tuesday when I was 17 years old, that I was an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be known. My name is Isabelle Crane. I am 32 years old, and this is the story of the morning my stepmother told me I was nothing. 6 weeks before she discovered that the signature on her employment contract was mine. My mother died when I was 11. I want to say that plainly, without the softening that people tend to apply to the fact of a child losing a parent, because the plainness of it matters to everything that follows. She died. My father grieved, and 3 years later, he married a woman named Renee, who had a talent for interior design, a gift for social navigation, and a very specific, very consistent inability to see me as anything other than an inconvenience wrapped in the shape of a daughter. Renee was not a monster. I want to be honest about that too, because honesty requires the full picture, and not just the parts that are easiest to tell. She was not cruel in the theatrical sense. She did not forbid things or deprive me of material necessities. She simply subtracted me. From conversations, from family photographs she curated for social media, from the version of her life that she presented to the world, which was polished and beautiful and contained, as far as anyone looking from the outside could determine, 1 husband, 0 stepdaughters, and a great deal of excellent taste in soft furnishings. My father, who loved me in the distracted way of a man who had rebuilt his life around a second chance and was afraid to examine the cost, allowed this, not through malice. Through the particular cowardice of a comfortable man who had decided that peace at home was worth more than the discomfort of confrontation. I had understood this by the time I was 15. I had left for college at 17 with the specific relief of someone escaping a building whose architecture had never fit them. I had built my adult life in the space that distance made available, carefully, methodically, with the focused energy of a person who has learned early that the only approval worth having is the kind that cannot be revoked by someone else's indifference. I had come back this particular weekend because my father had asked me to. His birthday, family dinner. "Please come, Isabelle." I had come. Renee had reminded me, by 9:30 on Saturday morning, exactly why the drive home always felt longer than the drive back. I need to tell you what I had built. Not because the building is the point. The building is never entirely the point. But because you cannot understand the morning in the kitchen without understanding what I was carrying when I walked into it. Crane & Associates was a mid-sized HR and workforce management firm operating across 4 states. We handled hiring strategy, compensation structure, benefits administration, and, most relevantly, payroll processing for a roster of corporate clients that had grown steadily over 8 years from 3 accounts to 41. I had founded it at 24, with a business partner who had since moved on, and a client list that had started with 2 small companies willing to take a chance on someone young enough that they assumed the rates would be forgiving. The rates had not been forgiving. The work had been excellent. The client list had grown accordingly. Among our 41 clients was a mid-sized interior design firm, headquartered in the city where my father and Renee lived. A firm that had expanded aggressively over the past 3 years and had brought on Crane and Associates to manage their HR infrastructure 18 months ago. The firm was called Meridian Design Group. Renee had worked there for 6 years. She was, as of 18 months ago, an employee whose compensation, benefits package, and bi-weekly paycheck were processed, reviewed, and ultimately authorized by my firm. By me, she did not know this. The corporate structure of Crane and Associates was not something Renee had ever had occasion to investigate. And the name on the service agreement with Meridian was the firm's name, not mine. I had known since the day we signed the Meridian contract. I had said nothing, not from strategy, or at least, not entirely, mostly because it had not been relevant. I had built a business, not a weapon. The fact of my signature on her employer's payroll contract was simply a fact. One of the many quiet facts that accumulate when you spend 8 years building something real, while the people who dismissed you remain unaware of what is being built. I had not planned for it to become relevant. Then she looked at her reflection in the kitchen window and told me I was nothing. I drove back to the city on Sunday afternoon. I sat with it for 2 days. The words, the way my father had turned his newspaper page. The specific texture of being erased in a room you grew up in by a woman who had always considered your presence a design flaw. On Tuesday morning, I called my operations director, a thorough and unflappable woman named Carmen, who had been with the firm since year 2, and asked her to pull the Meridian Design Group account file. All of it? Carmen asked. Employee roster, compensation structure, contract terms. A brief pause. Everything okay? Everything is fine, I said. I just want to review the account personally. Carmen sent the file within the hour. I opened the employee roster. I found Renee's name, senior design consultant, 6 years with the firm, a compensation package that was comfortable by any standard and which had, 18 months ago, been restructured as part of the broader HR overhaul that had brought Meridian to us in the first place. I looked at her name on the screen for a long moment. Then I opened my calendar and scheduled a full account review for the following week, not to do anything, not yet. Simply to look clearly at a thing that existed and decide, with full information, what, if anything, it meant. The account review revealed 3 things. First, Meridian's compensation structure had an irregularity in the senior consultant tier that Carmen had flagged at the time of onboarding, but which had been deprioritized during the transition. It was not illegal. It was not even unusual. But it was the kind of structural inefficiency that, left unaddressed, creates quiet resentment among high-performing employees over time. Second, Renee's position had been reclassified incorrectly during the restructure, placed in a tier that undersold her actual scope of responsibilities. This had resulted in a compensation level that was, by the metrics of the role she was actually performing, somewhat below market rate. Third, none of this had been corrected in 18 months. I looked at these 3 facts and felt something that surprised me. Not satisfaction, not the neat symmetrical pleasure of a discovered advantage. Something more complicated. Something that felt, if I was being precise about it, like the mild discomfort of a person who has been handed a decision they did not ask for and cannot in good conscience avoid. I called Carmen back. The Meridian Senior Consultant tier, I said. The reclassification issue from onboarding. I want to correct it. All senior consultants or specific employees? All of them, I said. Correct the structure. Adjust compensation to market rate. Process it in the next cycle. A pause. That's going to result in retroactive adjustments for some employees, including back pay for the period since onboarding. I know, I said. Do it correctly. Carmen did not ask why. This was one of the things I valued most about Carmen. The letter arrived at Meridian Design Group 2 weeks later. A formal notification to all affected employees of the compensation correction and the retroactive adjustment that would appear in the following paycheck. Renee called my father the evening she received it. I know this because my father called me an hour later, with the particular careful tone he used when he was navigating something he didn't fully understand. Renee got a letter today, he said, from a firm called Crane and Associates. About her pay. I know, I said. A pause. You know, they're our client, I said. Have been for 18 months. Another pause. Longer. The firm on the letter, he said slowly. Crane and Associates. That's your firm. Yes. Renee works for a company that. He stopped. Started again. You process her paychecks. My firm does, yes. Has since we signed the Meridian contract. The silence on his end was the silence of a man doing an arithmetic he had not expected to need. For 18 months, he said. Yes. And you didn't. It wasn't relevant, I said. It's a business relationship between my firm and her employer. It has nothing to do with our family situation. Then why are you telling me now? Because you called me, I said simply. I didn't call you. He was quiet for a long time. The letter says she's getting a raise, he said finally, and back pay. The compensation structure had an error that should have been corrected at onboarding, I said. We corrected it. That's standard practice. You corrected an error that resulted in your stepmother getting a raise. I corrected an error that resulted in several employees getting raises, I said. Renee is one of them. Another silence. Isabelle. His voice had something in it I had not heard in a long time. Not quite apology, but the register adjacent to it. The voice of a man beginning to reckon with a distance he had allowed to grow. Dad, I said quietly, I need to ask you something. Okay, last Saturday morning. In the kitchen. Were you listening? The silence that followed was the most honest thing my father said to me in years. Yes, he said. And you turned the page. He said nothing. I'm not calling to punish anyone, I said. I corrected a payroll error because it was the right thing to do professionally. That's the whole story. I paused. But I need you to understand something. I have been building a life, a real, substantial, functioning life, for 8 years. While Renee told me I was nothing, while you turned pages. And I built it anyway. Not for you, not for her. For me. Another pause. I just need you to know that the nothing she described does not match the reality. It never did. He was quiet for a long time. I know, he said finally. I've known for a long time. Then say so, I said. That's all. Just say so. Renee called me herself the following evening. I had expected her not to. Had assigned perhaps 40% probability to the version of events where she absorbed the information, recalibrated privately, and never acknowledged it directly. Renee was skilled at strategic silence. She called. I didn't know, she said, when I answered. No preamble. The directness of someone who has decided that the social machinery of softening is no longer available to her. I know you didn't, I said. Your firm, the contract. 18 months. Yes. A silence. And you corrected the error anyway, she said. The compensation thing. You gave me a raise. I corrected an error that affected several employees, I said. You were one of them. You could have. She stopped. Done something else? I said. Yes, I could have. I didn't, because this is a business and business decisions are made on professional grounds, not personal ones. I paused. That's the difference between us, Renee. I don't use what I have to hurt people, even people who have told me I'm nothing. The silence was longer this time. I owe you an apology, she said, not just for Saturday, for a long time. I had imagined this moment in various forms over the years, imagined what I would feel, what I would say, what I felt was tired. Cleanly, simply tired, the tiredness of someone who has carried something heavy for a very long time and is finally, carefully, setting it down. Yes, I said, You do. I'm sorry, she said. I hear you, I said. It was not forgiveness exactly. It was the acknowledgement of a debt that had been stated, received, and recorded. What happened after that would take longer, would require more than one phone call, would involve my father and time and the slow, imperfect work of people deciding to try. But it was a beginning, and I had learned, over 8 years of building from nothing, that beginnings are the only part that require courage. The rest is just showing up. My father called the following Sunday. Not about Renee. Not about the contract or the payroll or any of the architecture of the week that had just passed. He called to tell me about a project he was working on in the garden. A new section he was planning. Something he thought my mother would have liked. He described it carefully, with the particular attention of a man who is telling you one thing while meaning another. I listened. At the end, he said, I'd like you to see it, when it's done. If you want to come, I'll come, I said. Good, he said, good. We stayed on the phone for 20 more minutes talking about nothing in particular, his garden, my work, the weather in both our cities. It was the longest conversation we had managed in 3 years. When I hung up, I sat quietly in my office, the office I had built, in the firm I had built, in the life I had constructed from the raw material of being told, repeatedly and without hesitation, that I was nothing. Nothing had built quite a lot. And the woman who had said it had spent 18 months cashing paychecks that carried, invisibly and without drama, the signature of the nothing she had made. I did not feel victorious. I felt something quieter and more durable than victory. I felt, finally, like myself. If you have ever been told you were nothing by someone who should have known better, this story is for you. And I have to ask you something before you go. What do you think Isabelle should have done differently? Should she have revealed the truth sooner? Or was her silence the most powerful move of all? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button so more people who need to hear it can find it. Share it with someone in your life who is quietly building something while the wrong people are watching. And if you believe that silence can be the most powerful thing a woman carries, subscribe, because every week we tell the stories of women who built empires while the world looked away. Your first month of Audible is completely free. Link is in the description. Over 500,000 titles waiting for you. Don't let it sit there. Use it.